In this module, we are going to be creating an auto scaling group. Previously, we've been able to create an application load balancer in our AWS. We are on our AWS dashboard. We've been able to create instances. We've been able to create key pairs, security groups, instances, elastic IPs using VPCs. Now we are going to be creating an auto scaling group. We are going to be creating an auto scaling group. So if you click on auto scaling groups, you'll see how auto scaling groups work. Auto scaling groups help us to be able to manage our traffic based on the traffic requirement, to either increase a given number of instances to match our traffic requirement or decrease the number of instances to match our given traffic requirements. And for you to create an auto scaling group, once you're on the EC2 console, there are some key things. You could equally click on the sidebar here where we have auto scaling groups. You can equally click on this to be able to create an auto scaling group. But AWS tells you that an Amazon EC2 auto scaling group helps you maintain the availability of your applications. So you can actually, or this is how it works. You have an auto scaling group. You have a minimum size, like minimum number of instances, where if there's no much traffic, you scale to your minimum number of instances. And then you have the scale out as needed. If there's increased traffic, you scale to a given number of instances. And then of course, you want to always have a desired number of instances. So AWS says an auto scaling group is a collection of EC2 instances that help or that are treated as a logical unit. You can configure settings for a group and its instances, as well as define the group's minimum, maximum, and desired capacity. So you can read out the EC2 auto scaling documentation to get more information about auto scaling groups. Now, for you to create an auto scaling group, you need to first create a launch template. And if you scroll up here in your EC2 console, you'll see we have launch template here. After instances, instance types, we have launch template. So we'll click on launch template. An auto scaling group requires a launch template to guide you on how to create the various instances. So there's an easy to launch template, streamline, simplify, and standardize instance launches. So it's like using the same configuration for all your instances once the instances are created. So rather than you running EC2 user data on multiple instances, one after the other, you can use an auto scaling group to provision those instances with the same user data. So once you're under EC2 user or EC2 launch template, you click on create launch template. And when you click on create launch template, we are going to call this Devops in Mic launch template. And then they say description, a prod server for my app. So you can equally give it any description you want. So I'll say give the same description. I'll copy this description, and paste here. And then I'll say auto scaling guidance. Select this if you intend to use this template with EC2 auto scaling. We do not want to select this here, but if you selected it, it could give you more details on auto scaling guidance. For now, we are going to allow it as without auto scaling guidance. Now the next thing is to select an application OS. This is the same like you're launching an EC2 instance. So we are going to use the quick start. We come to quick start, and what this means is every time you want to provision an instance, which AMI do you want to use? So the launch template specifies the AMI which you use when launching or when creating new instances. So I'll select the Amazon Linux instance, and of course we allow the default Amazon Linux 2023 instance. And then for the instance type, we'll see use the T2 micro. Since we're trying to be economical, we use the T2 micro, which is free tier eligible. So I'll select the free tier eligible T2 micro. And then for the key pair, I'll select, that means any instance that is provisioned within or with this launch template must specify or must use this particular key pair. We use the Devops in my key pair, which we created in our previous module. Now for the network settings, if you do not want to specify any network settings, you can select that you do not want to specify. We are going to use our Devops in my prod public subnet. So this launch template is created in Devops in my prod public subnet. We can select an existing security group, or you can create a new security group. So we are going to come under select existing security groups, and we'll use the e-commerce security group. So we come under subnet, we select the Devops in my prod public subnet. For the existing security group, we select existing security group. We could as well create a new security group, and then for the security groups, we can select the e-commerce security group. Now under EBS, we are going to allow the default 8 gigabit EBS general purpose SSD for the EBS configurations. To summarize, we give the name Devops in Mic launch template version. Can give it the same template version description. That means every time you're launching a launch template, what version are you currently using? So we can say this version is version 1. We can give it the name Devops in Mic launch template version 1. And then of course you select the AMI. So when you click here, you see instead of having recent, you click on quick start, then you see Amazon Linux. When you see Amazon Linux, you allow the default Amazon Linux 2023. For the instance type, we have the T2 Micro, the default T2 Micro. For the key pair, we use the Devops in My key pair. And then for the subnet, we use the Devops in My prod public subnet. And we'll be using an existing security group, the e-commerce security group, which we created in our previous module. You could as well create a new security group. And then we are going to allow the network configurations the same. Under advanced detail, you click on advanced details. If you could add, or if you wanted to add an EC2 IAM role, you could click on IAM instance profile here to add a role, as well as you could add some user data. So let's come back to my repository and let's use the user data of web server 1. So I'll come back to our user data for web server 1. Just for the purpose of demonstration, I'll copy this user data of web server 1. I'll come to create launch template and I'll right click and paste. So summarily, we've added some form of user data under additional details. And once you launch this, you have everything. These are the defaults for the launch template. Creating a launch template is almost the same like creating a single instance, but this is a template that will be used by the auto scaling group to create as many instances as you request. So once you have this, you click on create launch template. If all your configurations are good, you will see a launch template is created. So successfully created the Devops in Mic launch template. So you can click on view launch template. So you click on view launch template, you see Devops in Mic launch template. The default version is version 1 and the latest version is version 1. So if you want to modify this launch template, you could select on this launch template, you click on actions here and you can modify this launch template, which will create a new version. So if I'm to change the user data of my launch template, I could click on modify launch template here, and then under this, the description now will be Devops with Mic launch template 2, Devops in Mic launch template 2, and this launch template is using the same default configurations as the previous launch template. If you click on the source launch template here, you see the source is currently using the Devops in My launch template 1, which we created previously. So we have the same, it's using all the same configurations. But now in this launch template, we are just going to change by the user data. So I'll come to advanced details. You maintain everything. You just give the new name Devops in My launch template 2. And in the source template is using the same Devops in My launch template 1, which you created previously. The launch template contents, we maintain them as the same. T2.micro, Devops in My key pair, the same subnet settings. The only thing we are going to do is to scroll right down to the bottom. Under advanced details, we are going to modify the user data. So instead of having the user data for web server 1, I'll come to Devops in My e-commerce website. I'll come to the user data 2. I will be using the Devops in My user data 2. So I'll copy the user data 2 for the Devops in My. Under the modified template, I'll replace all of this. So I'll press Ctrl A. I'll delete and then I'll paste this new user data. So this corresponds to user data 2. Once I paste this user data, I'll click on create template version. So summarily, I just came under advanced details. I click on under advanced details here. I come to my repository. I copy user data 2. I come back to modify and I paste it under user data 2 and I click on create template version. So this has created a new version. So if I click on view launch template, you'll see it is not a new template that was created. We have just one template in the account, just one template, but under this one template, you'll see we have the default version is version 1 and you also have latest version 2. So you can equally see these are the information, or this is the information of the various versions. So this is for version 1. These are the configurations. You can scroll here. You also see for version 2, which is the second version which you created with another user data. So you can use launch templates to create as many versions of a given configuration which you want to be used or which you want to use in your auto scaling groups. So once we have created a launch template, the next thing is for us to come to our EC2 user or to come to our EC2 console side panel, and then we search for auto scaling groups. So we search for auto scaling groups. Once we click on auto scaling groups, we click on create auto scaling group. Now this is where we are going to create our auto scaling group. You see it comes with a default step-by-step guide. The first is to choose a launch template. The second is to choose instance launch options. The third is to integrate with other services. And then you configure group size and scaling. You add notifications, you add tags and review. We are going to give this auto scaling group the name Devops with Mic ASG to signify auto scaling group. So we give the name Devops with Mic auto scaling group. Now as we create this Devops with Mic auto scaling group, for the launch template, if you scroll down, you see we have our Devops with Mic launch template. If you do not have a launch template, you click on create launch template. Now, every time you're creating a versioned, or anytime you're creating an auto scaling group with a versioned launch template, you must specify the version. So we are going to be using our default version. But if we're creating this launch template and wanted to use version 2, we could specify any of the versions which you want to use. And the default version is version 1. So create the auto scaling group with the version 1 launch template. So this is it, the description, Devops with Mike, launch template 1 for version 1. This is the launch template. The instance is using T2.micro. No spot instances. This is the AMI, this is the key pair, and this is the security group. So once you have that, the next is to click on next. We'll choose the instance launch options. So these basically are the options that AWS will use every time it's spinning up a new instance. So where do you want to spin it up? Which VPC? We always want to spin it up in our prod VPC. Which availability zones we want to use our prod availability zone and possibly our stage availability zone every time it's trying to launch instances. Now, do you want the availability zone distribution? How do you want the auto scaling to balance between the availability zones? Do you want to do it balanced only, or you want to use balanced best effort? We use the default balanced best effort. Now, once you do that, you take next. This is the most important thing. Do you want to add an application load balancer? Previously, we create an application load balancer, so we can add an application load balancer to this auto scaling group. So we now have the auto, we now click on the attach an application load balancer. You choose a load balancer target group. So we created our Devops in Mike target group. This is the target group we created for our application load balancer. So I'll select this target group. Now we are going to allow this VPC lattice integrations as default. We allow the application recovery controller as default, and then we click on next. Now this is the most important configuration. Configure group size and scaling options. So define your group's desired capacity and scaling limits. How do you want to scale the instances? What's the number of instances that you want to have by default when there is no traffic or there's no low or high traffic? What's the number of instances you want to have by default? So I'll put our default instances here as 3. Now they say you can size your auto scaling group manually or automatically to meet changes in demand. So they say set the limit on how your desired capacity can be increased or decreased. So since our desired capacity is 3, let's say we want that at any given time, if there's no traffic, the minimum number of instances we should have in our environment should be 2 instances for our minimum desired capacity. Meaning if there's no traffic, we should have 2 instances up and running. But if there's high traffic, we should scale up to 5 instances. So AWS will create 3 new instances or 2 new instances to add here to be able to match our traffic. Now, how do you want AWS to determine when to add servers or decrease servers? That is where the option of auto scaling comes. So you can use auto scaling to manage how traffic will be routed between our respective servers. And as far as the routing is concerned, we can use the no routing policies where AWS will do the routing automatically, or we can use the target routing policy. And the target routing policy is based on some form of metric. Do you want to route the traffic based on maybe CPU utilization, network in bytes, network out in bytes? So it gives you the possibility to use CloudWatch metrics to use as the determinant for when to increase or decrease the number of web servers. We are going to allow it as default, and I will say for our target tracking, we are going to be using the average CPU utilization. So we are now saying that if the average CPU utilization is below 20, or the target value is 20, so we are using 20 to determine if it's above a given value or if it's below. Our determination value is 20. 20 will be used to determine if we should increase a server or if we should decrease the number of servers. So we allow the target value as 20. Now instance warm up, they say you can use instance warm up assuming you have some form of configuration data you want to run every time the instance is coming up. You want to use this instance warm up time. So they give another information. They say you can optionally specify the number of seconds that it would take for a newly instance to warm up. So until a specified warm up time has expired, an instance is not counted towards the aggregated EC2 metric auto scaling. So we're just going to say instance warm up for this use case. Since we are in practice, we'll say 3, or where we say 5 seconds. And this is instance maintenance policy. Will allow the default, but you can use the launch before terminating policy or the terminate and launch or custom behavior. And then under additional capacities, we are just going to allow the additional capacities as default. Again, under this stage, we give the desired capacity as 3, minimum capacity as 2 and a maximum capacity as 5. And we choose the target scaling or the target tracking scaling, where we are tracking based on the CPU utilization, and our target value is 20. If the CPU utilization is above 20, we add new instances. If it's below 20, we decrease some instances. And after that, we allow these other configurations as default, and we click on next. Once you click on next, we are not configured SNS, but SNS is a method through which you can set up notifications to enable you get notifications if your servers have been increased or decreased. So SNS, simple notification service, SNS helps you to give information or to integrate such that if there's a scale in action or a scale out action, you can get notified using a simple notification, maybe email or through SMS. So we are going to skip this step. We'll skip this step and then we take next. And for the tags, we can allow default tags, and after that you can click on next. So this next will give you a final review. We are using the Devops Mic launch template. These are network configurations. We are using the Devops Mic prod VPC, and then we are using our load balancer as an additional integration with other services. And for the configuration, the group size and scaling, we have a desired capacity of 3. And then our scaling, we have a minimum capacity of 2, a maximum capacity of 5. And then we are using target tracking based on our CPU utilization. It says as required to maintain average CPU utilization at 20. This is a summary of the resources or the summary of our auto scaling group. Once we have that, we click on create auto scaling group. Now when you click on create auto scaling group, let's open our EC2 in a new tab. I'll come to my ACT console. If I come to instances here, previously if I type instances running, I have just 2 instances, the server 1 and server 2, which we created in our previous module when we were looking at application load balancers. So we created server 1 and server 2 during the creation of our application load balancers. Now if you come to auto scaling groups, we see our auto scaling group is currently being provisioned. So if you select the Devops in my auto scaling group, you can get some information. This is still the desired information, or this is the information we got upon creating the instance. So you see it is updating the capacity. Currently 0 instances are up and running. The minimum capacity is 2, the maximum capacity is 5. If you refresh this, you see the 3 instances have been provisioned. The status is not yet indicated. The desired capacity is 3. If you come to the H2 console, if you refresh now, you will see some 3 new instances have been created. These instances are instances created by the auto scaling group. We have 1 instance, 2 instance, and the 3rd instance. They have all been created by the auto scaling group and they are initializing. If you come back to our auto scaling group here, if you refresh, you see that the instances are all up and running for our Devops in Mic auto scaling group. Now if you see integrations, we've already integrated to our application load balancer. You could do some more integrations for the auto scaling group. If you come to instance management, now these are the 3 instances. You could create some other configurations like lifecycle hook, some actions which must be performed the moment you're terminating your instances, and then warm pool. These are some other configurations you can set up as far as auto scaling groups are concerned. So you can refresh the instances if you want to refresh all your instances. If you come back again to our EC2 console and you refresh, you will see that the 2 instances or 3 instances have been all provisioned. So let's give it a few minutes for them to pass the 2 on 2 check. So I'll refresh again, and I'll see the instances have passed the 2 on 2 check. Once the instances pass the 2 on 2 check, what we are going to do is we are going to delete this other instance or one of the instances, or even let's just select 2 of the instances. So we're going to delete 2 of the instances. We have these 2 instances. I'll take right click and then I'll take terminate. So I'll terminate those 2 instances. I'll say terminate and delete. So you see successfully terminated or successful termination of these 2 instances. I'll refresh and you see those 2 instances have been terminated. We currently have just 3 instances running. If I was to pick any of these instances like this, for example, if I want to pick this instance and put aside the monitoring, I select this instance. Let me scroll down. I don't want to do the monitoring. Come here, or let me close this. Select this first instance, and then let me scroll this down or up. The 3 instances or the 2 instances have been deleted. If I refresh this tab, this is the current instance. The instance is currently in the running state. Now, if I refresh the tab again, without me going through all the steps of creating an instance, you see new instances are being created. If you take note, new instances are being created automatically because the auto scaling group detected that we had some instances deleted. If you come to our auto scaling group and you refresh, you'll see we now have 4 instances because some instances were deleted. Some are currently being deleted, some are currently being created. If you come to our EC2 console, let's cancel this filter. Let's clear all filters. If you clear all filters, some instances are being terminated. These 2 instances were being terminated while some instances are being initialized. This first instance is being initialized. Let's go back again to our auto scaling group. If you refresh, the desired capacity, the number of instances has moved to 4 because we deleted some 2 instances, so some new instances were created. Let's refresh the tab. If you refresh, you now see we have the 2 instances that we deleted before that have been created. So that's basically how auto scaling works, and you can do auto scaling to be able to manage the load on your traffic based on some given metric. Again, if you come to your auto scaling group, this is our auto scaling group which you created. These are some necessary information as far as this auto scaling group is created. If you refresh, you can see more information, number of instances, desired capacity, minimum capacity, maximum capacity. And then you come to AWS EC2 console, you equally see that some of the instances were created and some of them were deleted because we manually tried to delete them. So in as much as these instances are running, if you delete them manually, you will still have them being created by the auto scaling group. So for us to delete these instances, we begin by deleting our auto scaling group. So if I click here, I come to actions, I click delete, and I type delete, you see you delete the instances. We are actually tearing down the resources. So if I type delete, you start deleting the servers. It starts by deleting the auto scaling group. If you see the status here, the status shows that it is deleting. So let me refresh. Status shows it is still deleting. Now, while the status is showing that it's still deleting, we can come to instances. If I refresh, you'll see some instances will be shutting down. Let's take the refresh again. I'll refresh and I'll keep refreshing till I'm sure that our auto scaling group has passed the information. Let me come back here. Let me refresh. It's still deleting. Number of instances 5. Currently deleting the auto scaling group instances. If I come to the instances, let's do a refresh again. And when you refresh, the instances are still in the pending state because the auto scaling group has not yet deleted the instances. So let's refresh and give it a few minutes. It's still deleting. Because our auto scaling group grace period for the health checks was 300 seconds, we need to wait 5 minutes before our auto scaling can completely delete, or our auto scaling group can completely delete. So let's refresh. If 5 minutes has elapsed, then that is the only condition under which our auto scaling group will delete those instances. So the same number of units is still currently deleting. Let's come back here. Let's refresh. So 5 minutes has not yet elapsed based on the given health check grace period. So once the auto scaling group deletion process is complete, you take you back to your auto scaling dashboard here, and then you come to instances. If you refresh now, because our elapsed time has completed, all the instances have been terminated automatically by the auto scaling group deletion. So the other instances we have are the targets of our application load balancer. For us to equally delete these targets of our application load balancer, we come to our EC2 console here. We equally click here for the EC2 console. We come under target groups. Under target groups, we select the targets. We come to our targets, and then we can select both targets. We tick the 2 targets under our target group. We deregister the 2 targets. You see successfully deregistered 2 targets. After deregistering those 2 targets, we click on actions, we delete, and then yes, delete, successfully deleted the target group. So we cannot delete the target group because it's currently being used by a listener rule, and this listener rule is our application load balancer. So you come to application load balancer, you select your application load balancer, you click on actions, delete load balancer, and then you type confirm. When you type confirm, you click on delete. This will successfully delete the application load balancer that was in my ALB. So if you refresh, you will no longer see any application load balancer. After deleting the application load balancer, you come back to target groups, and then you can take actions and delete. And you click on yes, delete. This should also delete the target group. So if you come to auto scaling groups, we do not have any auto scaling group. If you come to load balancers, we do not have any load balancers. And you can come lastly to your instances. You come to instances, you select the 2 servers, server 1 and server 2, and then you come to instance state and you click on terminate instance, and you click on terminate. So this should terminate server 1 and server 2. So you see shutting down. So after you've done this, you will have successfully created the EC2 application load balancer and EC2 auto scaling groups.